So Africa is a very low emitter, and there's a question of should we push towards, what's the balance between growth versus the push towards becoming green? And is it unfair that we're being forced to go in a green pathway where also the countries have developed in a different manner? So the way I think about this particular question or this particular debate point is, one, we're already where we are. It's unfortunate. And it's not as though climate change only affects the people that emitted the carbon dioxide. If anything, unfortunately, we are seeing a lot of the effects of climate change affecting Africa directly. As Kenya, for example, is still on the throes of maybe the worst drought in the last 40 years. You're seeing flooding happening in different countries on the continent. And so whether we like it or not, we are where we are because of climate change. And we can't remove ourselves from the fight because we are still part of the same globe. And so the first point for me would be we need to do whatever it takes to reduce climate because it's affecting us and affecting us negatively, and even more so Africa, that's a lot less resilient. The second bit around that, and I think this is where the conversations around funds for loss and damage, and I think when you think about the last COP, where there was a big push towards creating that fund, I think it's only fair that there is some semblance of making whole, as it were. And I guess you can never fully do it, but how do you make countries that didn't really play a role in the climate issues that we face today become a lot more resilient, or at least be a lot more prepared to face whatever it is that's happening as far as increased droughts, increased flooding, and so forth. So there's definitely, I think there has to be that conversation, and a real conversation, and not just conversation, but action towards helping countries become more resilient and ensuring that those funds exist. But when it comes to this question around how do we develop, I think we can look at it in a couple of ways. One is, yes, there may be a push towards let's utilize our fossil fuels, let's utilize all these different things that we have to, the dirty fuels as it were, to develop. But I think countries have to be quite careful about how they play this. And there's nothing wrong necessarily. I mean, one could say we need to use this to make money. But I think there's some interesting policies that could come to play, which is, why don't you, if say you're pushing or using your fossil fuels, why don't you ensure that the revenues that are received are used to develop a greener economy? Because remember, you don't want to build out infrastructure for fossilized fuels that will not necessarily be used for another 20 years when the world has fully gone green. And we need to be quite clear around where the world is going. If we want to become the manufacturing hub of the future, do we want to be stuck with assets that no one is going to use because they no longer we have too much carbon footprint? So for countries that have fossil fuels, my suggestion would be, if you already have those and you're already utilizing them, why don't you take the revenues from those resources to make your economy greener? And then for countries such as Kenya, that are already green, as it were, I mean, our green is, the grid in Kenya is about 93% green. We're already on a pathway that's green, and it's going to probably be easier for us to raise funding to develop infrastructure in a greener manner, because the world is moving away from non-green investments. So even in terms of raising funds and ensuring that we have infrastructure funds, why don't you take advantage of the fact that it's going to be a lot easier in this current environment to do green investments. But for me, again, it's looking at this from a 5, 10, 20, 30-year horizon, where we build the industries of the future such that we will actually be the provider of choice when it comes to green investments or green manufacturing or green jobs, as it were. So I think it's a delicate balance, and I think it's a question of each country being able to look at itself and seeing where we are on the development journey. If we're already green, why don't we go even greener? If we already have fossil fuels, yes, we can utilize them to fund our development at the moment, but can we begin? There are ways we can begin to change certain things. How do we build our buildings? Are there ways, how do we, what are mobility choices? Can we begin to do e-mobility and those kinds of things, so that you're making choices that are pushing you towards a greener future, in as much as you're utilizing resources that are coming from your fossil fuels.